In section 6.5, we're going to be looking at probability, and what that includes is we're going to be doing what are known as Punnett squares, which I believe many of you have already done in science classes before. So Punnett squares illustrate the outcome of genetic crosses. The Punnett square is a grid system for predicting all possible genotypes resulting from a cross. The axes represent the possible gametes of each parent. The boxes within the grid are going to show the possible genotypes of the offspring. And from that, you would be able to identify the possible phenotypes as well. So once again, over here would be one parent, there's another parent, and then inside this grid is all of the possible gametes for those two parents if they ended up actually reproducing. So the Punnett square yields a ratio of possible genotypes and phenotypes. A monohybrid cross involves one trait. So that mono means one. So monohybrid crosses examine the inheritance of only one specific trait. Homozygous dominant, homozygous recessive, all heterozygous, all dominant. So we end up having a white flower crossed with a purple flower plant, and you see that all of the offspring are going to be heterozygous, and they are going to end up being all purple. So when we put this parent on the Punnett square, you're going to put this F is going to go right there. This F is going to go right there. And same thing, this F goes here, this F goes there. And then you pull the information in and down, and you're going to fill it in like you'd do a math table. The only thing that I suggest is that you put the capital letter first, so you don't have confusion. Heterozygous to heterozygous is, if we look at two heterozygous crossing, we're going to end up with a 1 to 2 to 1 ratio for the genotype, and then we're going to have a 3 to 1 ratio for the phenotype. So that's what we see here. So it's two heterozygous ones that are crossed. So heterozygous, heterozygous. And then the genotypic ratio, so the genotypic ratio, there's one that is capital F, capital F. So that would be 1. And then you have 2 that are heterozygous. And you have 1 that is homozygous recessive. So that's the genotypic ratio. The phenotypic ratio, we count up how many purple flowers do we have. We've got 1, 2, 3. So that is the 3. And we have only one white flower. So that's the 3 to 1. All it's basically saying, you can also do percentages with this too. So you could say that 3/4 or 75% chance that you're going to end up having a purple offspring, and a 25% chance that you're going to have a white offspring in that particular cross. When you have heterozygous and homozygous cross, or homozygous recessive cross, it's going to be a 1 to 1. A heterozygous and a homozygous recessive, it's going to be a 1 to 1 ratio for both the phenotypic and genotypic ratio. So a test cross is a cross between an organism with an unknown genotype and an organism with the recessive phenotype. So Here is a test cross. You didn't know what this parent was, but we knew this parent had to be white. Since it was white, it had to be that genotype. So when we cross them, we see, oh, well, this parent over here had to be heterozygous because they had some that were white. Now, we'll do a lot of practice on the monohybrid crosses before we move on to the dihybrid crosses, but dihybrid crosses are pretty much the same thing, except for you're just looking at two traits at one time. So dihybrid crosses, Mendel's dihybrid crosses with heterozygous plants ended up giving him a 9:3 to 3:1 phenotypic ratio. So Mendel's dihybrid crosses led to a second law of independent assortment. The law of independent assortment states that allele pairs separate independently of one another, of each other during meiosis. So another scientist ended up going a little bit further on that later and ended up saying that it was actually the chromosomes that assort independently of one another, and they don't affect one another. So, and this is showing Mendel's cross here. So he has both of them are heterozygous for yellow and round, and you end up seeing that it's going to you're going to end up with 9 of them being yellow and round, and then you're going to have 3 that are going to be wrinkled and yellow, and 3 that are wrinkled and green. I'm sorry, 1 that's wrinkled and green, and you're going to have 3 that are round and green. So that was his cross that he ended up doing. Probability is the likelihood that something will happen. Probability predicts an average number of occurrences, not the exact number of occurrences. Probability, the way you figure it, is probability equals the number of ways a specific event can occur divided by the total number of possible outcomes. So probability applies to random events such as meiosis and fertilization. So an example of probability is if you flip a coin, there's 2 sides to the coin. So 1 out of 2 is a 50% chance, depending on what you end up having come up with the coin, and that's what it's showing you here in this picture. So that is the end of the notes for section 5, and like I said, we will be practicing these crosses quite a bit in class.